Hi there and welcome to the CyberHut TV and our vendor introduction series. My name is Simon Moffat. I'm founder analyst at the CyberHut, and in these vendor introduction episodes I get to interview amazing identity security startup organizations to understand a little bit more about how they are solving some of the key problems in our industry. Absolutely lucky and privileged to have David from Axiomatics with me. David, thanks for joining.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Not at all. I appreciate how busy it is working in startups and changing the world of identity security. So I appreciate taking a few minutes out. And for those who've not seen one of these episodes previously, I essentially get to ask three very important questions. And I always start off with the same question, which is essentially, what is the problem that Axiomatics is looking to solve?
It's a really good question. In a nutshell, we're trying to solve data access, application access, making sure that the right people or the right services, by the way, does not have to be humans, get access to the right data, the right processes, the right APIs, under the right circumstances at the right time. So if I had to give an example, if you're in a medical scenario, you want to make sure that only the relevant doctor get access to the relevant medical record of the patient they're treating at the moment they're treating the patient, not at 3 a.m. during a party, for instance. That's the problem we're trying to solve. I'll add to that the fact that if you go back 15, 20 years, Axiomatics has been around since 2006. We're probably one of the older companies in the space. If you go back to 2006, 2010, a huge focus was definitely on security and data access and things like regulations, export control, very much FUD, fear, uncertainty, doubt, scaring people into buying a security product. In the last 5 years, that's changed. There's also a dimension of developer efficiency, meaning that instead of having a developer try to figure out how access control is going to work in their app, they're going to use a utility, a library, an Axiomatics, or another product to do that authorization. And that is partly thanks to other fields where, go back 15 years, authentication was a burden. Auth0 comes along. They make it way more developer friendly and they make it as a nice to have an efficiency dimension. And that's sort of seeped onto the authorization rules.
I love that. It's the right access at the right time. It's a really simple sentence, isn't it? But it's a really hard thing, isn't it? It's a really difficult thing to do. And I like that developer efficiency aspect. I think you're absolutely right. I think over time, organizations have tried to build this stuff for themselves, haven't they?
Yep.
Homegrown access control solutions, hard-coded permissions, complex enforcement systems, and then suddenly it breaks or it's hard to extend, hard to expand, and then you have that. Developers can't they can't find the ability to repeat that across multiple different systems and so on and so forth. So, all right. So, right access at the right time. I like that. That's an easy one to understand. But I guess, why is this becoming a problem now? It sounds like it's been a problem for a long time, and these homegrown systems, these legacy systems, are they just not built for the modern world?
Yeah, so there's two dimensions to that. The developer efficiency angle, it's a newer challenge because developers have more power, they have more expectations of how tooling should work, and they want to get their job done more quickly, more efficiently. So definitely in the past 5 to 10 years, with the advent of everything as code, policy as code, infrastructure as code, with the advent of microservices, developers have this expectation that they should be able to work very quickly, right? If you and I were building an app now and we needed authentication, we shouldn't be spending more than a day to figure out authentication, right? Same story with authorization. The other side of it, the bigger side of it, the security side, the compliance side, it was a problem 15 years ago. It's an even greater problem. And the way that I look at it is there's more people, there's more data, there's more services. And so the attack surface is greater simply because there's more opportunities for the bad guys to steal data. And by the way, I said the bad guys, but it could be accidental as well. Not all breached access is intentional. Sometimes it's, whoops, I made a mistake. If you go, there's a really great website maintained in the US by the Department of Health and Human Services, HHS. They have something that is nicknamed the Healthcare Hall of Shame, I think. And essentially it's where you publish every single breach by an organization where they have breached more than, say, I think 500 records is the threshold. And you'll notice in there, some of them are thefts. Others are, whoops, I printed the wrong records 500 times, mistakes. Anyway, why is it a problem now? It's just, simply put, there's more data, but there's also the desire to go through a digital transformation. If you think about the way we banked, 15, 20 years ago, the way we did healthcare 15, 20 years ago, everything was stored at the bank on paper. Everything was stored at the hospital on paper. So the access control was sort of physical access control. And that was okay, I guess. It was as good or bad as, as the building it's in. But we, the consumers, the patients, the people who bank, we expect to view our data, to interact with our data, to own our data online. So if you expose your data online, you have to secure the data as well. That's actually reflected if you look at OWASP, the Open Web Application Security Project. I keep forgetting what it stands for. They have two top 10 lists. One is a general top 10 threats, and the other one is an API-specific threat list. In both cases, the number one issue is broken access control. So they've realized that a lot of apps don't know how to handle access control. It's oftentimes an afterthought. The developers try to tack on access control. They don't do a great job of it. In addition, going back to something you said, Simon, you end up having one way of doing authorization in one app, another way of doing authorization in other apps. You end up with what I call authorization silos. And the individual silos, they might be okay, but every time you have silos, you've got gaps in between. The gaps are not okay. It might be you have a certain set of permissions or entitlements or access rights in a silo and a different set in another silo that are conflicting or that have missing permissions between them. So that's kind of why it's a problem now. Just the sheer amount of data, user services, processes, and also the opportunity to do that digital transformation and serve people better.
Well, yeah, I think there's a huge set of problems now, isn't there? Really, I think that, as you said, there's more data, there's more systems, there's more apps, APIs, web, cloud, on-prem. So there's more stuff to protect. And I think ultimately you're right as well, Neil. The bad guys, the bigger the attack surface becomes, the bad guys will go after that stuff. And there's simply more. There's more harvesting to be had by them. But I quite like that. The thing around. If you think about risk around, there's an impact and a likelihood of a risky situation. I think now the likelihood of a data breach being related to access control and authorization is really, really high based on things like OWASP and stuff, but also the impact is really high as well, because the stuff being protected, as you say, it could be healthcare information, it could be PII, it could be intellectual property, it could be whatever. It's important stuff. So so we've got right access, right time. Why is it a problem now? Because the impact and the likelihood of this stuff is getting bigger. So that leads us into the final question, which is ultimately, why is Axiomatics therefore best placed to try and tackle some of this stuff?
And before I tackle that question, I forgot to add, of course, in point number 2, regulations, right? The regulators are here to make sure that we protect the data. So they come up with pieces of legislation like GDPR, like open banking, like down in Australia, they have something called the Essential 8, if I'm not mistaken, which are ways they should be handling cybersecurity in the workplace. So all these are regulations that we as a vendor and we as a community, to be honest, we need to help the companies implement in the best possible, the most transparent, visible, and auditable way so that we know we're doing it right. So why are we best placed to solve it? Well, number one, we are the original editors of the leading, or at least former leading authorization standard, XACML, XACML. We've been editing that standard since 2006 when our co-founder Eric took the helm of the Oasis technical group. XACML has lived its course. It's a great standard. The model is perfect. NIST took that model to write their A-level paper. So the P star P, PET, PDP, PIP, which are things that we implement directly. Since we've actually developed a more lightweight standard called Alpha, the abbreviated language for authorization. So we've put a lot of thought and care into making standardized access control, not vendor locking. We really believe in standards first and developer experience first as well, right? Actually, one of the challenges with XACML was that it was not very developer friendly. One of the benefits of Alpha, and now I'm working on Alpha 2.0, is to make it more developer friendly. The other aspect is, we're almost a 20-year-old company, we'll be 20 in 2026. We've seen every single shade of customer, every single hue of customer, from banking to government to manufacturing to retail. We've seen them all, right? Or almost all of them. And it's interesting to learn from each and every customer. The defense customer will be absolutely, focused on their security. It's paramount to make sure that, the need to know basis, for instance, only the right people under the right circumstances on secure devices. The retail customer is a little bit more different. They'll go, yeah, of course we want to make sure there's not any fraud in a retail transaction. But if there's a shred of a doubt, maybe we'll let the people buy the product because we'd rather take the cost of fraud when that cost is not significant and let people transact. And so the other way around. So now we learn there's a whole, there's multiple shades of what authorization means to different individuals. And also, in more recent years, we've dealt with startups as well, building new products. And that's where the developer efficiency piece comes in. Yes, they worry about security, of course, like everyone does, but they also worry about how quickly their developers can write an app. So if they can onboard a framework, onboard a product, like an Axiomatics, like an Auth0, like, something else that helps their developers focus on what they do best, the functional piece of their app, and then delegate the non-functional aspects to specialty products, the best of breed products, then all the better. So in a very long nutshell, it's a very big nut. That's why we're best placed to solve it. And we're continuing that innovation, by the way, Simon. I think you're aware of the work that we're doing at OpenID with Auth0. What's interesting is that we're seeing a whole new wave of other authorization frameworks and vendors. I'm thinking of, Asserto, 3Edges, OpenID. We're all contributing to OpenID Auth0 to make sure that we develop better authorization standards for the future.
Love that. It's, it's not an easy problem. Authorization. I think it's everyone thinks authentication is the easy thing that's done. Access control authorization, it's a much bigger beast, and I think leveraging standards, having that broad appeal, because ultimately you want authorization to sort of proliferate across all those different systems, be it as you say, web app, API, whatever they could be. And I think standards is a great way to amplify that and just essentially have as many different systems protected as possible, which it sounds like you guys are committed to and looking to achieve. So that's a really good, exciting,
absolutely
healthy thing to do. Yep. That's super. I think access control. I think the next 5-10 years is going to see a huge boom in how we use and think about authorization. I think as you described there, it's ultimately data is the new oil or the old oil, depending on whatever you want to read about, and AI is powered by data, and we need data for B2C, for B2E, for workloads, services, everything else, and how we protect APIs and services and everything else is certainly a huge part of that. And it sounds
absolutely
like you guys are on track to try and solve the world of all of our access control problems. So David from Axiomatics, thanks for taking a bit of time. I believe you're at the airport, aren't you? Keeping edgy, keeping it rock and roll while you're on the road, which is
Probably
cool.
See a couple planes outside.
Look at that! Look at that!
No more planes. I miss my plane.
Fabulous stuff. Well, thanks for taking a little bit of time out to chat with me on the Cyberhook TV. This has been another episode in our vendor introduction series. So thank you for watching. Thank you to David, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.